came to England in the 60s. I joined financial services in April 1982. So as of April this year, I've now been in around the finance and financial advice for some 34 years. A little longer than 20.
20. See, I make a fool of myself.
Not at all. You're trying to be kind. You're trying to hide me age. So I joined in April 1982, and in actuality, when I joined the industry, there were no industry regulators. The FCA, as it stands today, the Financial Conduct Authority, which replaced the Financial Services Authority, didn't actually exist. There were no industry-wide qualifications for anyone wishing to be a financial advisor, as I did. I was a painter and decorator. On a Friday, hung up my brushes and my overalls, and on a Monday, I got on a train and went to Swindon out in Wiltshire to go on a 2-week residential course in order to become a sales associate of a life assurance company. By chance, as opposed to design, and I'm always honest about that, a friend of mine nagged me for about a year and a half to come and join him at this company, Hambro Life. He thought I could do very, very well at it, and I was saying no, I can't see myself in an office. I'm an outdoor person, and
you used to be a paint decorator.
I was a painter and decorator. That's where I started. I started out as a painter and decorator. And anyway, in the end, he said, "Look, I've made an appointment for you to come and see my manager." So I thought, well, out of courtesy, I've got to at least go and see the manager. So I went and saw his manager. Long story short, I ended up going through the 4-interview process, did the psychometric test, etc., got through all of those, and decided, yes, I would join. And as I say, by accident rather than design, I joined what was considered the top company to join in the country at that time for the level of training that they provided you with in terms of the product knowledge that you were given, as opposed to a lot of companies focused on sales technique. This company was more of, well, we've recruited you because we believe you can do that side of it. What you haven't got is the knowledge of the products. So they trained you well. As I say, they built a custom-built training centre in Swindon at that time.
So you was there for 2 weeks,
and you have to go and stay in Swindon.
For 2 weeks.
They put you up in a hotel. They feed you. They coach you backwards and forwards to this training centre, and you're there for 2 weeks, and then you get all the baseline training. So that initial training was in what we call protection products, which would be life assurance and investments. So you got life assurance investments by way of regular savings on a monthly basis, lump sum investments, pension planning, executive pensions, companies' pensions. That's all the stuff that we did. Inheritance tax planning, capital gains tax planning. Now, the strange thing is, 34 years down the road, those core subjects have barely changed. The truth of the matter is the core of those things remain exactly the same, but every government and every chancellor does a little tweet on it to suit their political purposes at the time. So some things that existed when I started don't exist anymore. For argument's sake, if you had life assurance back in the 80s, you used to get tax relief on the premiums that you paid on a monthly basis, which was paid by the government of the day to the insurance company on your behalf. Doesn't exist any longer. You used to get tax relief on your mortgage payments. It was called MIRAS, mortgage interest relief at source. They scrapped that. So certain things have changed over the years, but the core information remains exactly the same as it did then, 34 years later. And that's the joy and the beauty and the wisdom of being able to look back over 34 years. Because the advisor I am today, I would say, is far better than the advisor I was when I stepped into that role 30 years ago.
Let me just bring it back, because 34 years ago, so you done your training, 2-week training, and then what happened after that then, after the training?
I actually became active. I was able to go back to and join an office in Essex where I lived, and then go out and start seeing clients. And to be frank, I wasn't very good.
It wasn't very good.
I wasn't very good. I really struggled. You're self-employed, and my wife would say, "Well, you put on a suit and went to work every day for the whole month. How comes you ain't got no money?" Because you used to get, I was paid on commission.
Yeah.
So you don't do a deal, you don't get paid. But I found out much later, just looking back at things, I'm very fortunate that I don't look my age.
Yeah.
So when I started as a 28-year-old, being fortunate enough to look 10 or 12 years younger than I actually am, I can see why I struggled, because most people thought, what's this boy doing sitting in the front room talking to me about pensions and investments, and I'm 40 and he looks like he's just left school. So clearly I was up against it, but I never recognised that at that time, because in actual fact at 28 I'd already been married for 9 years. I'd already 9 years. I wasn't 20 when I got married. I was just before 20. So I'd already been married for 8-9 years. I'd already owned my own house for 7 or 8 years, and I'd already been a dad for 7 years. So at that point, I did have a story, but because I didn't tell anybody, they didn't realise that I actually knew something about what I was doing, because I'm living it. I'm paying a mortgage. I'm looking after a wife and my son, and sending him paying for him to go to school. So I struggled. In truth, I struggled, but I found my way, and I left that company after about 4 years, and joined one of my associates at that company who'd left and started his own company, and that was, as I was saying earlier, placing mortgage advisors inside estate agents, which was in the mid-80s, 85, 86, and I joined him and became a mortgage advisor, and that's been my specialist area from the mid-80s. Mortgage advising. But of course, because I've been in and around property finance, life assurance, those sort of things, I've got a wide working knowledge of those things, although today I choose to specialise in a particular area. My background and my training and the constant reading keeps me right up to date with all the other factors that are going on, the developments and how the industry's changing.
So I just want to jump in there, because I'm quite fascinated already. So do you, if you're experienced, do you train other people up to speed kind of stuff, what you know as well? Do you do specific?
I had a brokerage on the Strand in London, in central London, for 10 years, and I did have staff at that time, and I did have people that I trained through, and in fact I was doing that back in the 80s as well, because it ended up, although I was placed in a estate agent, I ended up with a group of estate agents that I was responsible for, and some other advisors. I trained those advisors, and then when I had my own brokerage, I trained the individuals that worked for me then as well, because I have a particular way of working with people, and that is more so as an advisor as opposed to a salesperson. I'm not looking to sell clients a product. My goal is to try and help you achieve a dream or achieve a goal. So whether you come to me to buy in those times a 1-bedroom flat in the East End of London, and that 1-bedroom flat, for argument's sake, was £75,000, just to put a figure on it, and then the next guy comes in to me, is buying a £500,000 house in Kensington, or flat in Kensington, going back a good few years. Both those individuals are trying to make a dream come through. That 1-bedroom flat in East London, as the first place they're buying, is still somebody's dream. The guy who can buy the 500,000 one is just fortunate he can buy a 500,000 one for a first time, but they both have a dream that they're trying to achieve. So I try and make those dreams come through. That's my goal, and to do that in a way and in a manner that people understand what they're doing. So part of you welcoming me here today, and for me to get involved, is to look at how I can assist with the 34 years experience to lift and pass on some financial literacy, and lift the financial literacy within the community. So that's broadly what I'm doing, and that's why I've got involved with the events that you put on, working with Sean. It's, having got to where I am, and in terms of age and life, it was, so what am I going to do do with all this information? Am I just going to take it with me in a pine box? And so what's the life work about if you don't start doing something with it? So this, when I was invited along, this opened up that opportunity to share this information, because all my business comes to me through word of mouth recommendation today, and always has done. I've never advertised for business. My business has always come to me through word of mouth recommendation. Okay, and I hope that's that's a validation of what I do. So even being here today, it's not about business. It's about trying to impart knowledge and upliftment for the community, in sense of the world revolves around money.
That's right. In fact, okay, so you mentioned that because Keith was saying, and that if you like or not, everybody have money worries, money challenges, and so forth. And the thing is that reason why Keith and myself were pushing the crowdfunding, because it's opportunity for those who can take advantage of crowdfunding and put their dreams, their goals into reality, and help their organization, their business, because the reason why we're saying that, because reason why people can't really leap forward, because it's always that stumbling block with the money issue and so forth. And last night we touched a little bit about the partner. We better go talk about the partner, because the partner
that's
system,
all crowdfunding is.
It's all crowdfunding. You're absolutely right. It's all crowdfunding, and the partner was a great system, because with that you have to people have to come together, people have to trust, and was able to in fact the partner was able to buy properties.
Well, that's how my parents' generation, probably your parents' generation, raised their deposit. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, possibly even into the early 80s. Partner was still a strong thing within the black community, and a very, very useful tool, which regretfully has gone by the wayside, like so many other kind of cultural bits through the assimilation and integration into Western society. So it's unfortunate we've lost that. But crowdfunding is a very important part. And what I do is, in terms of, let me just tell listeners where I'm at and in terms of what I specialize in at the moment. So I specialize in buy-to-let mortgages, portfolio restructuring. So if you've got a small portfolio of 5, 10, 15, 20, I've got clients with 100 plus properties, how to use those assets to leverage what you've got, raise more funds, be able to buy more property or restructure what you're doing. So that's part of what I do. Then I do commercial finance by way of development funding. So if you've got a property that you want to renovate, or you want to get into buying, renovating and reselling property, or buying, renovating and keeping property, then that's one of my specialty areas. That's what I help you work on and achieve. So such as funding for auctions, funding for how to just go out and find your own property, etc. How you can do that and finance that. One of the things to be I'd like listeners to be very aware of is, often there's this belief that I've got to have money to make money, and that's not entirely true. If you have assets, then you don't act. If you have assets at a particular level with a certain amount of equity in it, equity being the difference between the mortgage that you might have on the property and what you would gain as a profit if you sold it. So if you've got a property worth 100,000, you've got a £50,000 mortgage on it, you sell it, you make £50,000. Well, that £50,000, because you've sold it, you classify as profit. If you're living that property, you own that property, but you're not selling it, then it's referred to as equity. So in that scenario, there's £50,000 worth of equity in there. Now, if you want to go out and buy something that you want to renovate, you may not have 50 grand in the bank, but I can structure a deal where you can use an element of that equity along with the security of the property you're buying to potentially achieve what we refer to as 100% funding. So it is personal. It does depend on personal circumstances, and this is where in a way kind of leads into the crowdfunding, but not in terms of crowdfunding. It's where we as a community have to get to a point, I believe, and can do, in recognizing there's a tremendous amount of wealth in the community.
Oh yes, yes,
tremendous amount
truly.
of wealth, and wealth. I mean, in terms of financial wealth by way of assets that are held.
Well, I'm glad to see you touch on that, because I mean, you know, I've given thanks to Sean, because Sean brought some things down to the whole thing about that's why it's important to have a trust, and it's quite interesting because I mean that, for example, right, when you know, your parents pass away, right, and you know, typical thing that they'll be in a home, right. Now then, what they do, right, what they do, they will calculate how many years he was in the home, right, and the amount of money they call it, there's a word they use,
long-term care fees.
Long-term care, but the term word they use, probate, that's it. You know I'm with you now, right? And trying to calculate things up, right? You have no money. All that money is paid for the care fees. You see what I'm saying? And that's why Sean said that you must have a trust.
Yeah.
Because they know that everything you have, equity, you know what I mean, that's the asset.
That's the asset.
Basically, go to the government.
Yeah. Well, the real important bit in terms of that example you just given, that it's important for people to recognise, note and remember, is that all local authorities throughout the whole of the UK have the statutory power to actually take a house and sell it in order to provide and pay for that long-term care.
Yeah.
And the important bit there is they have the right by law to take your mum's house or your dad's house, because they're on their own and nobody can look after them, and they need to go into care, so they've got 24-hour care. That local authority can step in and sell the property that they're living in to pay for the care, and then when only £23,200 is left, that's what whoever's inheriting can inherit. So it's tremendously important that people understand that and take that on board. So if we go back with the equity side of things, is what I'm saying here is this is where one of the biggest, or say one of the most negative things that's constantly said about the black community and our community is a lack of trust. And there isn't a need to do things on trust. There is a need to do things in a business-like manner. Use the tools of business.
I like what you said there.
Use agreements. Use solicitors, get them involved, get things down in black and white, so you're not talking about, I thought you meant, you said this, me said that, coal fat dog bed, right? 3 months or 6 months or 6 years down the road. So sort these things out at the beginning and check them as you're going along. Now, if we look at my area and we look at property transactions, if 3 brothers, for argument's sake, or 3 strangers in the community want to come together and buy a property to renovate it, I've got an example. A plumber, who's a good plumber. He's got 2 mates. One's a Sparks and one's a plasterer. So they want to come together and start buying and renovating property. So the first thing I said to him was, get yourself, you're not going to be a limited company, get yourself a partnership agreement drawn up. Right. And put in place what's the individual responsibilities on a day-to-day, project-to-project basis.
No, here the brother says no, because it's very important, because more time, right? You know, we come together and we say, look, we want to do so-and-so. And you know, after about a year, people follow that. You know, it's human, right? And then get vexed and roll up our arms off, so to speak. Yeah,
exactly.
Right,
exactly.
That's why it's very important, as the brother said. Put things down on paper.
Yeah.
You know, most of the time you see people argument and first of all, but I did that. If you don't put it on paper, you know what I mean?
And what are they arguing about? They're arguing about what was said a year ago, 18 months ago. First and foremost, human beings are like this. We all have selective memory. First of all, everybody's got selective memory. So you're going to remember the bits that you thought were important to you, and you're going to remember the bits that you thought were important to you. And then there's a bit in the middle that neither of us bothered to remember. So you're going to have arms out and you're going to have problems problems because you haven't bothered to you haven't remembered everything. So it's better to actually sit down and draw up some agreements. What are the individual's responsibilities within each project? But the part of that is if the three of them come together now and they've got 3 properties, one each, now they can make this dream come through of purchasing properties and renovating them, because I can use those assets as leverage to raise the funding that they want in order to be able to buy, renovate and sell, or buy, convert and sell. So they don't have to have cash in the bank.
Yes.
As such.
Yes.
Yeah? Or the
saying.
amount of cash that they think they might have to have in the bank can be substantially less. So they might be thinking, well, we got to have 100 grand cash between us to get this started.
No. So you use the leverage, what the equity of the
you use the leverage of the assets that already owned.
Right.
Now, same thing goes if the 3 of them want to get together and do that, but they don't own any properties. Well, do your parents own a property? Is there a brother or a sister or a relative who owns a property, who believes in you sufficiently that they will allow their property to be used for the benefit of doing this? Now, people say, whoa, hold on, you're asking me to put up my house. You're asking me to put up a property that I own for you to be able to go and build a business, or for you to go and buy a property that you're going to renovate and sell. Yeah, but you're safe in the sense that, again, it's about making sure the right agreements are in place and making sure that you've the individuals commit to the project properly, and also making sure that your agreements are in place. But most importantly, this is not a harebrained scheme, for the want of a better phrase, where there's nothing tangible. They're going to buy a property, and you're only risking anything once the property is bought. So, but if it goes wrong, if the project doesn't work, there's still a property to sell.
Still a property to sell. That's
so you can sell that property, which then pays off any money that had been borrowed. So the risk is about managing risk.
I was going to ask you a question, but you answered the question for me.
Okay.
Yeah, you've answered.
So this is part of the challenge. This is part of the challenge that I find that we all have. I've worked for myself since I was 19.
So you was 19.
So that's 43 years now. So everybody out there now knows my age, or can work it out. So I've done that for my entire life. So you might say, well, I'm risk averse. It's not about being risk averse. It's about managing risk. It's knowing what the risks are, and then managing those risks, as opposed to making assumptions as to what the risks are, which is what the general public at large in our community tends to do. Is, why, that's too risky for me. I can't get involved in them things there, because we work hard for the little thing me have, and you follow what I'm saying. So that immediately the mind is closed to, how can it happen? How can it be made to work?
But Antonio, I'm glad you've kind of reason to respond this, because these are the kind of things we need to talk about, and we need to have workshops, or have events where we talk about, you see. And now it comes down to really to understand, because we don't really understand certain things, We don't understand fundamental things, right?
Correct.
And one thing you said earlier on, that this thing about trust, and so was important, but it's not about trust. It's about having a business agreement, put them black and white, because as you know that when things go sour chip, people blame that person. It's always there for. Never look at
never look at yourself.
Never look at yourself. You see what I'm saying? And it happens all the time. And often put it in paper now, then you
And often those disagreements and the falling apart of good partnerships come out of the fact that there is nothing to refer back to. There's only memory. If there are agreements in place, often those arguments that take place would never reach the place that they reach, where there's no coming back. So, we live in the real world. Husband and wives argue. Even after 40 years, like myself, right? You still argue, on occasions. But with arguments can go to a point where there's no coming back.
No coming back, yeah.
So in business, that then destroys the business relationship, often destroys a friendship, because that business started out between two friends more often than not.
Yes,
so
yes.
it destroys a friendship, destroys a family connection. You know, husband and wife used to go with their kids round to that person's house and they'd eat and drink and everything. And then they have a row, they get together in business, and 3 years down the road they have a round, they fall out, and all of that gets destroyed. It's not just the two guys who then fall out or the two ladies who fall out. The whole family then gets dragged in.
It's true.
So it's
true.
very destructive.
It's true. I mean, let me give an example, because I used to be like because I used to be selling merchandise at concerts and events and all that stuff there, right? And I used to sell at different football matches and everything. And there was a particular guy I get to know, right? And he used to supply a lot of the football grounds, then, right? Right, you know, all the merchandise, scarves and hats, all that kind of stuff, right? And then, you know, I mean, we had a good relationship, you know, so to speak, right? And then one day, right, sometime I met I didn't know his brother. Me and he was talking. He said that he does the same thing as well. And I mentioned about his brother, but you know, and he goes, "Listen, I don't talk to him. I don't talk to him. Nothing to do with that. He uses some violent words. You know what I mean? I don't nothing to do with him. You know what I mean? I don't want to say what I said. You know,
don't align me to him.
Yeah, right.
I'm
he said that his family don't, because his sons don't want to do with the. You know, what you said is true. They just they hate each other.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but some do business, of course. You know
it's
what
that thing of dropping the pebble in the throwing a stone into a puddle, into a pond, and what it do? It ripples out.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. So in business, it's absolutely essential to use the tools of business so that there's a way of resolving things. And part of using the tools is right. If we've got to a point where we're at an impasse in trying to decide something, at the very beginning you decide who's the professional team that you will go to for advice. So we've got to a point where we can't see eye to eye on something to make the decision. So is it we need to go and sit and have a conversation with the accountant? Do we need to go and sit and have a conversation with our solicitor as to what we need to consider to make the right decision? How do we go about that, as opposed to, well, we just sit in a room and we go head to head and we can't make a decision, and it ends up with a big row where man's talking about, I'm going to put you on the floor and stamp on your head, because I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen, Dougie. Friends who were friends when they were boys. That's where it got to. And when I saw that with my own eyes, I thought, boy, I need to intervene and see if I can help save this situation, because these guys have got. But by that point, they'd got to a place where that wasn't going to be repairable. You know. So it's essential that you use the tools, because then you're not dealing with trust alone. Of course, it's nice if you're working with people that you feel able to trust. You know, I've been in business with friends of mine where the business, because of the last recession, in actuality, had to be closed. We're still great friends. We're still great friends because we've known each other for 30 odd years. All of us, you know, two brothers and myself. So it is doable. You can do that, but it's because we had a framework.
Okay.
The framework was in place. We knew what we all had to do.
Yes.
So that stops the resentments and stops the arguments, or reduces the possibilities of arguments, and reduces the possibility of resentment building up, because you get this situation where, okay, well, me put in so much money, and you guys don't seem to be doing your part, and it's my money, you know. And so you get that kind of thing. It's like a power play starts taking place. But that's where that person still also has to realize, well, you knew what you were getting into, and you knew that the others weren't putting money in, but what they were bringing was expertise, or they were bringing time, or they were bringing energy, knowledge, and know-how. So that's got a value as well. You on your own, if you could have done it on your own with your money, then you would have done it. But clearly those guys bring something to the table as well. And when I say guys, I mean the other parties. I'm not excluding the ladies, because they're very successful business women within the community, who have built businesses over many, many years. So when I say guys, ladies, don't get offended. I'm talking about all of us. So it's using the tools to put aside the thing of trust and in terms of, well, this is what we're going to do. But it's about investing a bit of time, and it's about investing a bit of seed capital in terms of going to pay the right professionals to draw up the irrelevant agreements for you. So there are partnership agreements, which I recommend to everyone when they're entering into our partnership. Of course, with a limited company, it's slightly different. You're all directors, and in a limited company as directors, you have a title. So you may be operations. Well, what does operations mean? You know, so what does that mean on a day-to-day basis? What are you going to do? So you and I have to decide what it is I'm going to do as director of operations on a daily basis.
Okay, let me ask a question. So if you have, say, you set up a company now, right? Can you set up a trust with, like you have a like
your shareholding. My understanding of it is, and Sean is obviously the specialist in this area. My understanding is your shareholdings in any businesses that you may own can be covered as part of the trust, so that it's out of the reach of. So the business itself, I'm not aware that the business itself can be in the trust, but your shareholding in it can be in the trust. So that's how that will work. So in terms of coming back to what I do is in facilitating these things is and talking, as I say, in terms of hopefully assisting the community in being more aware of au fait with the terminology. What I say is part of what we need to recognise as a community, and as you said earlier, in terms of having the conversations, is that some time, effort and energy needs to be invested by each one of us as individuals. I'm not for a moment suggesting that people need to go out and become a financial advisor or become a mortgage broker, but actually, yes, it would make sense to read Money Mail on a Wednesday. There's a section for the last 40 years in the Mail on a Wednesday that is about finance. And when I say finance, it's about money matters from the perspective of how it affects the general public at large. So it's written in that way, and it covers subject matters that are relevant. Same thing on a Wednesday, the Express does Express Money. So they have and these are maybe 6-8 pages covering travel money, mortgages, life assurance, pensions. It's all there. So it's about spending a bit of time just buying those 2 papers on a Wednesday and spending an hour reading them, and you'll start to gain some understanding and start gaining the language, because every industry has its own language. So when I say equity, there will be those who don't get equity. So I may talk in. That's why I gave the example of if it's worth 100,000, you sell it, you make a profit, and you've got worth 100,000, you've got a mortgage of 50 on it, you sell it, you make a profit of 50,000. If you've got a property that's worth 100,000 with a £50,000 mortgage on it, and you're not selling it, then the profit, the difference between the 50 and the 100,000, is your equity. If you chose to sell it, you would raise that money. So that's why I use those examples, and I use 100,000 and round figures because it's easy for me to do in my head, right? Because I use a calculator otherwise, so I use simple numbers, you know. And part of what I like to try and get across as well is, you know, this is not the world of finance and personal finance and business finance is at our level is not complicated. But there's a belief that it's complicated. There's a belief that personal finance is complicated because what you hear is people talking in a language that you don't understand. So which is why I try not to use the acronyms, and I try not to use the industry jargon when I'm speaking with clients. And if I do, then I stop to explain it, such as equity. So it's about us as a community recognizing and being proactive in taking responsibility for the upliftment of our knowledge base for ourselves and for our children and our grandchildren in terms of investing a certain amount of time on a weekly basis. So I've mentioned the Mail and the Express on a Wednesday. The Times on a Sunday carries a 15-20 page business section, which doesn't mean you've got to sit there and read 15 or 20 pages. I didn't when I started out. I would look through it, look at the headlines and pick those things that I thought was of interest to me, and would grow my knowledge as an advisor. As time has gone by, of course, I can read all of that and understand the bulk of what's being said, because even, you know, as you heard me say there, personal finance is very much what the mass of the population are involved in. Then you've got business finance, and then you've got the finance that's above that, which is like banking, insurance, etc., government funds, etc., those sort of stuff. That's another level. So now I've got an understanding across all those levels, but I have my specialist area. So all I'm saying to people is invest half an hour a week in yourself, so that you understand these things, because they impact on you. Governments change these things, they impact on you. You know, this week we've had talk of, for argument's sake, we've had talk of negative interest rates, which probably means nothing to the majority of the population. And what they're saying is, at the moment, I think it was RBS, who own NatWest, who was saying that they may start charging businesses, not individuals, businesses, for leaving their money in the bank.
Yeah.
So that's called negative interest rates. So they might, if you're going to put 100 grand in the bank, they may charge you 0.75, 0.75% over the course of the year or monthly. I'm not quite sure. They didn't say how they're going to do it, but let's say it's over the year. They're going to charge you to keep your money in the bank.
Charge you to keep your money in the bank.
Correct.
I'll get it.
Right? So again, it's just having an understanding of that, because although that might seem, I'm not in business, it's got nothing to do with me, but they're talking about the Bank of England potentially doing the same thing, reducing interest rates to what they call a negative rate.
Well, we've got someone on the line. Oh, we'll take this caller, because I want to take the lively, but see someone so eager to. Greetings.
Hi, is that Dougie?
Yes, greetings.
Hi, it's Jean, Pat's friend from Make It Happen.
Okay.
Do you remember?
Yeah, you want to make a contribution?
No.
Oh, okay then.
She's calling you an old matter, possibly.
Oh, they're calling back to talk about something else, yeah?
Yes, I am. Yes, that's all right. Yeah, I did hear your show last night. It was very good. I enjoyed the bit on businesses as well.
Yeah.
And then I had to go to my bed basically, but it was very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is that I went to one of your meetings at the Tarkview Academy when Affinity was there. I think, was it the guy Steve about trust?
Yes.
Putting your
Sure.
trust. The thing is, yeah, Sean, exactly. Yeah. Do you know anyone that's actually gone with him, and possibly whether everything's up front and the trust actually pays out at the end of the day?
Yeah, from my understanding, yes, because what they do, Antonio's here.
What I would just ask there, when you say the trust pays out at the end of the day, what do you mean by that?
Well, the thing. Right, okay then. My family and my mother, we've met with a representative from Affinity a few times, and we spoke about putting the house into a trust. But then we thought we'd kind of look around and ask other people, but no one else comes up with the same thing as sort of, Affinity and Bill. So I was just wondering whether there's anyone that had any joy at like I said, when the property's passed to the family or whatever, whether everything's gone up front. Because our understand is that HMRC will definitely come for the inheritance tax at the end of the day, no matter what.
Okay, well, it's just to say, trusts don't pay out. That's why I queried what you meant by that, because it's not that it pays out. But in terms of in effect, what you're saying is, has anyone that Affinity Legacy have assisted with setting up a trust actually passed away, so somebody can actually validate that the trust works in the manner that's been explained? That's what you're asking, yeah?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Correct.
That's something I can't answer at this moment on air, because Sean is a legacy Affinity, and that's their specialist area. So that's really something you need to direct to Sean directly, and for him to see whether or not he's able to put you in touch with somebody who can say, well, yes, since we've done this, unfortunately the person has passed away, and yes, that which was said the trust would do and achieve has been achieved.
Sure. And another thing is that we've spoken to quite a wide range of people, and another friend of ours also, but no one makes it sound as easy as Affinity setting up the trust, even though they've made it sound like it's actually impossible to do now, and not pay the inheritance tax, and, it's just... Well, so that's another reason why I'm ringing and asking,
Again, I would say to you to be, so that you're not, you're actually getting accurate information.
Yeah.
Then I would say you need to speak with Affinity Legacy. You need to speak to Sean directly. We'll be able to answer that for you. That's his specialist area. So what we're doing here with Brother Dougie is trying to come together as individuals who have got deep levels of experience and expertise. And in a sense, while some of what we do overlaps, we have our specialist areas, and what we don't do is try to guess at answering a question. So, I would much rather direct you back to Sean, not for any other reason other than that you get an accurate answer to your question.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was just ringing Dougie. Like you said, whether anyone had passed away, and
it was more an off-air question for Brother Dougie as opposed to being involved in this afternoon show. Okay.
Well, are you come to the event Sunday? We're talking about everything about crowdfunding.
I may try to. I've got an event on Saturday. I'll try to come on Sunday. Yes.
Okay then, no problem.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the call. Yeah.
All right.
That's all right. Okay, bye.
Yeah, and also, I'm Sean will be there. Sean will be there. Sean will be there Sunday.
Okay, I'll have a word there.
He's doing a workshop with Antonio in one small classroom. In fact, we've got to mention that. Okay then. Thanks again, my sister.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you. Okay then.
Bye.
So part of that working with the community to lift the knowledge is, yes, part of it is some personal responsibility to recognise that we as individuals have a primary responsibility to ourselves to gain some knowledge in this area, because everything we do or everything that is done by the institutes and the systems impact on us some way or the other.
That's right, absolutely.
So it's important to know that. So if we go just simple things like, there are some myths around mortgages, for argument's sake. People believe that, even to this day, there are people who still believe that you can't have more than one mortgage. That's entirely wrong. You can't have more than one residential mortgage, but you can have as many mortgages as mortgage lenders will lend you, providing you match their criteria. And you can demonstrate, and this is where we're talking about investing in property, primarily residential property, where the lenders have their criteria, and provided you fit the criteria, you can have the mortgage. And it's as simple as that. And when it comes to buying property, residential property for investment purposes, it's based upon the rental income that's going to come in on a monthly basis, that rental income demonstrates that it can pay the mortgage on a monthly basis.
Right.
So your own income doesn't come into it in assessing your ability to own the property. It's the rental income that's assessed as to whether you can buy that property or not. Of course, you still need to have a deposit. Of course, you still need to have funds to pay your transaction fees, solicitors' fees, valuation fees, brokers' fees. You do need to have those. And yes, you do have to have an income. Now, with most buy-to-let lenders, that income, most of them have what they call a minimum income. So they want to know that you you earn in excess of £25,000 a year as an individual. If you're buying jointly with some lenders, it is as long as between the two of you, you've got £25,000 a year as income, they will accept you. So you might think, well, why 25,000? Why do you need to have a minimum income? Why is it set at 25,000? Well, what the lender wants to know is that you're not going to need to live off the rent coming from that property. So if you have a life crisis and you have problems, that you're not going to spend the rent money and don't pay their mortgage. Right? They want to know simple things. They want to know that you've got money that you earn each month that you're going to live on. You're not dependent on that rent. So that's why there are a handful of companies who don't require you to have a minimum income, but they do require you to have an income. So you've got to still be able to demonstrate that you have an income.
Yeah.
And in some instances, that income can be pension income, because they recognise that older people, especially over the last few years, will want to take their pension lump sums and use that in order to buy an investment property in order to assist them during their retirement years. So they know that. And again, the other thing is, well, boy, I'm 60 now, we can't get no mortgage, it's only going to be for 5 years. No, when you're talking about investment properties, and the same thing, I refer to them as investment properties, but they are buy-to-let mortgage properties are also known as investment properties. So it's the same thing I'm speaking about, although I'm flitting between two terminology. So when you're buying an investment property, your age is not as important because the mortgage is being paid by the rent. So it's not about paying off the mortgage within a given period of time. It's just about being able to pay the mortgage on a monthly basis that matters to the lender. So as a 60-year-old, you can get a 25-year mortgage on a property that you're going to be renting out, a buy-to-let property. You won't get 25 years if it's going to be your main residence and you're going to live in it, because that depends on your ability to go to work to earn the money to pay the mortgage. Well, if you're only going to work till 65, there's no point me giving you a mortgage for 20 years to age 80 and you're 60 now, because how are you going to earn the money after 65 to be able to pay me? When I say me, the mortgage company, that's how the mortgage company is looking at it. So just to be clear there, you can only have one residential mortgage. That's actual and that's factual and correct. But outside of that, you can have as many investment mortgages as you like. As I said earlier, I've got clients with over 100 properties, 50 properties, 3 properties, 5 properties, 10 properties. They're all on mortgages. They're all acquired legitimately because the lenders will allow you. Some lenders will say, you can have as many mortgages with us as you would like, as long as the total doesn't exceed £3 million. So depending where you're buying in England or in the UK, you can go and buy any number of properties until you actually hit £3 million with that one lender. Well, what happens when you get to 3 million? You leave that lender and you go to another lender.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
So why do they say 3 million? Is it because?
Well, I just use that as a figure.
As a figure.
Some of them might say it's 1 million. Some will say it's 10 million. The companies have their own particular. What they're looking at there is what I spoke of earlier. It's managing risk.
It's managing risk.
You as one individual.
It's true.
Are into them for 3 million quid. So they don't want too many people who are into them for that amount as a one individual.
I see.
So to manage their risk, they say, we'll help you, we'll lend to you until you reach this limit. Once you reach this limit, you need to go and borrow somewhere else. Your mortgages stay with me, and your mortgage you just continue paying them, but I just can't lend you any more money. You need to go and get some money from elsewhere.
Because it's about managing as well, isn't it? Because because
so they're managing their risk. If something goes wrong to you, you're as a business, because owning property that you rent out is a business. It is a business.
It is a business.
So if anything goes wrong with your business, that business being investment properties that you rent out, they don't want to be exposed to you for any more than a certain figure.
Let me ask a question then. I mean, if I've got all these properties with this particular, we call them
mortgage lender,
mortgage lender, right? And say I've got over, say 50, right? And something happens to me, like I
pass away.
What happens?
That depends on a number of things. Obviously, the mortgages are in your name. If they're in your name as opposed to a limited company, they're in your name. They do need to be repaid. Depending on how you've been advised, you may well have relevant life assurance in place.
Right.
written into trust, and here I'm talking about a different type of trust to what we're talking about with Sean, that they're written in trust so that they're outside of your estate and made available once the insurance company actually has sight of the death certificate. And at that point, they'll pay out enough money to clear the mortgages.
Okay, then.
If you haven't got relevant life assurance in place, then those who are inheriting have to make some way or find some way to actually clear those mortgages off, because I'm aware of one case where some leniency has been given by Halifax in terms of a mother dying and the 3 daughters who inherited, Halifax allowing the mortgage to continue without being changed over immediately, either into their 3 names or one of the 3 of them name, or the property having to be sold. So the mortgage that the mother had has continued, but ordinarily, to the best of my knowledge, a mortgage cannot remain in the name of somebody who's deceased.
Because the reason Mark said, because me and his friend had a conversation, we just reasoning, I was around this place, we was reasoning, and he was saying to me that where he is now, right, because he's quite worried about his health now, because his health is quite deteriorating and everything, right?
Yes.
And he said to me that, it's quite a bit of money on the property he owns, right?
When you say on the property, in terms of a mortgage that's outstanding on the property, okay.
So,
just for the listeners,
he depends some for borrow money for pay this, and all that kind of stuff, pay off this and blah blah blah, and something depend. But he goes to me that he goes to me, boy, Doug, if something happens to me like tomorrow, right? He's concerned that he's picking them have to pay off the mortgage. And I said to him, how's that? He said, well, that's how it goes. I said, well, but then I managed to really haven't. But I don't know. That's it.
Well, that's true. The mortgage at that point, the mortgage is due and does have to be paid back.
So his children will be responsible.
Well, whoever's inheriting the property would have a responsibility to clear the mortgage on it, either by way of selling the property or by using life assurance, or by coming to an arrangement with that lender where they can either restructure the mortgage in order that it's in their name. So when I say restructure, change it from dad's name to mum to their name.
He said it's not really into their name, and what he's trying to do now is trying to get his family now to look at the situation, because why you say anything happened to him now,
this leads nicely into what I was saying when I was on Brother Muhammad's show in terms of financial literacy, is that Sunday dinner when rice and peas, let's stop talking a little bit more, let's start talking a little bit more about finance and personal finance and things such as mortgages, a little less about football, a little less about TV shows, etc. Let's start having that conversation. Just through those conversations on a regular basis, people will become more informed. So that's what it is. It's about being informed. It's about being knowledgeable. Where he's looking at bringing his family together to start having those conversations, that's great, and it's important. And some of that conversation may need to be with him and his children and a suitable advisor. And as with a lady who rang yesterday and spoke to me yesterday, and I said to her, in the first instance, yes, you need to speak with me in regards to the properties that are owned, but you're talking about mum's 81. What's going to happen there? Well, I was saying to her, well, we need to meet with Sean of Legacy Affinity. Oh, I've got it right. Forgive me, saying it the wrong way around there. And that would be a consultation. But what we would suggest is that consultation takes place with mum, her, and her 2 brothers present. Yeah. So everything is transparent and in the open and understood by everyone what's going on. So, and this is what we need to start doing, because
Antonio, listen, right, from experience and what I see, them thing that listen, man, you have to put them thing on the table, because I remember one time I was at a funeral, right? No, it was at the it's around the house, where you run the house, I played domino and
9 nights.
That's the stuff, right? And the man who played domino. In fact, I was playing on domino, and around the back, the women them chat and everything, right? We was boom, among some women them, right? The sisters them, right? So I said, wait, what go on, right? But what it was that, right? That the mother I think there's four girls, right? But what she done, she left the will in two of the doors them and left two of them out. So obviously we were forcing an arm doors, and to some extent, you know, I heard the argument. I said, to some extent, the mother's at fault to some extent, personally speaking, to some extent, right? But again, these things need to be ironed out from the beginning, because already you see the family just mash up through that.
Well, yeah, and you're quite right. When wills are being made, those who are writing the will do need to be. Yes, it's their wish as to how their estate should be divided up. And yes, there'll be those who don't care what impact it has once they're gone. But I think it's very, very important that people do consider the impact and what it's going to be.
Because I can stand the argument where the mothers, because first, you know, the door didn't really look after.
Two looked after and cared for and etc. And the other two didn't really have. You know.
So I understand, but
this is.
But after it has a serious impact
on the siblings and their relationship going forward. And again, it's the ripple effect. It's a fallout of that. So here you've got four sisters. Let's say they've all got children, and you've split the situation by giving two an inheritance and two no inheritance. So what happens to those cousins? Those children, do they continue to have contact with although the parents have fallen out? Are the parents, although they've fallen out, big enough to say, well, my kids should still associate with your kids so that they know each other? These are the sociological fallouts of these things that people don't think far enough down the road, primarily because of lack of knowledge and thinking down that road. Because the biggest challenge, not the biggest challenge, but one of the big challenges Sean, myself face at the present time, especially with the wealth preservation and the legacy planning, is mindset in terms of how people think. So we have a generation who are in their late 70s, early 80s, who are from a time where, you know, if you take my dad who passed away last year, is 86, he's born in 1926. It's a very, very different world. Very different world. And out of that conditioning of that time comes with you a way of thinking that lasts you primarily the whole of your life. One of those is that financial things are private, so you don't talk to. You know, there's black households where husband and wife don't talk about finance, or right, you got your bank account, I've got my bank account, you paying that bill, I'm paying this bill, whatever I've got left over, that's my business, whatever you got left over is your business. You know, so you've got all of that going on, and we have to be real about where the world is. So you've got all of that going on. So this is where, again, you know, the openness, the transparency in terms of having conversations around personal finance and things such as wills and the impact of them. So the challenge is mindset in terms of it took years to get my dad to write a will. Years, because if I no want dead and fight over when my dad and left, I feel no business. No, actually, Dad, there's some laws in the UK that says what happens if you don't leave a will. You know, so you need to actually write one of these. And I'm a financial advisor in the household. And we're having issues about him writing a will. So this is something that's very commonplace. When writing a will, I think it is, of course, the person writing it is trying to reflect what they think, or look at how, especially with children, how the children have interacted with them. But what I've found is, unfortunately, is quite often in life, different children play different roles at different times. So yes, in your latter years, child A might be the one who comes in every day in the evening and cooks you a meal and sees that you're okay. But 30 years ago, it was child B who was the one who used to come in, look after the kids for you while you were at work, and make sure everybody eat and do their thing then. So they were helping you at that time, but they were helping you in a different way. So they contributed, but their contribution might have been 30 years ago. But what happens is what I've noticed that happens is that some people, the elders, just focus on, well, what's happened in the last 5 years, as opposed to over the lifetime of those children being part of their life. So there's a lot to weigh up, and of course it's their right to choose what they do, and yes, that's why discussing the contents of a will openly and transparently with everybody available is not always the easiest thing to happen, and sometimes can't happen because that it'd be better that person or parent writes a will than not write a will by a consultant or an advisor kind of insisting, well, yeah, you must do this with all your kids present. There's a time when you've got to take the feel from the individual and say, well, right, these guys want to act without involving the children because they have their reasons why they want to do that, you know. So it's been alert to the variety of different ways in which people handle these matters. So there's much for us to learn, and we have a very, very, Brother Dougie, it's struck me in recent times that we have a huge learning curve as a community to go through, and we've got to go through it really fast, and I'll explain to you why. Because we've got, for the first time, and I would describe this as we're at a point where there's a possibility of an economic seismic change in where the community is. For this reason, we have the elders who are in their late 70s and in their 80s and moving towards their 90s, some of them, who are, in some instances, accidental millionaires, even though they don't know it. Accidental millionaires because they happen to own a house in the right place that is worth £1 million or more. Example, son rang me last week. Lady has a 3-bedroom maisonette, ex-local authority property in Battersea, across the road from where they're going to develop the Battersea Power Station.
Okay, I know it is, yeah.
So that property is worth £1.2 million. It used to be a council property. Yeah. Just because of where it is. Yeah. So that's an accidental millionaire. She doesn't even know that that's what it's worth, because as far as she's concerned, that's just where she lives. She's got no reason to bother with what it's worth. But that's part of the learning. We do need to know what our assets are worth, even if we're 80 and even if it's just our house.
Say that again, that's very important. To learn to know what assets is
we
worth.
need to learn to know what our assets are worth on an annual basis, even if we only consider it to be our house, because she owns a property that is 1.2 million that her children are going to inherit, and there needs to be a plan in place as to how it's going to be inherited and how it's going to be passed on. So you have that generation, then you have the generation behind that, my generation, who are the early 60s, and then you've got my son's generation, who are 40. My eldest son's 40 recently.
He's got married. Okay then.
So what we have is 3 generations, all of who have assets. All of whom need to be talking about how they're going to preserve these assets and pass them on. So we have 3 generations who all have to be doing the same thing at the same time, at the same pace, because the time is short. And if we don't watch out, what's going to happen is a lot of the wealth that exists within the community at the present time is going to end up being decimated by inheritance tax and by legal wars between those who are inheriting, who are going to end up in court fighting over these things. And I have a client now who's going to end up in the high courts in a fight between him and his 2 brothers.
Oh, okay.
Because he's again, because of how the will was drawn up and how it's been executed. So if we don't look sharp and we don't get to grips with this, and people need to be getting some financial literacy, some financial understanding, coming out to the events that you put on, becoming informed so you can make informed decisions.
But while you're there, let people know exactly what you'll be. We haven't mentioned the event we're going to do Sunday.
Yes.
What will you be talking about on Sunday at the part of your academy?
At the part of your academy, we're going to be doing the trust and legacy planning, wealth preservation, legacy planning, and yes, if there's time and there's a need for it, I'll talk around mortgages, the leveraging assets that are in place already, and that sort of specialist funding that's available to do these things.
Okay then. So, all right then, let's be clear what's happening Sunday. Because Sunday in the theatre we're talking about the crowdfunding, and there will be a workshop in one of the classroom, right? We can't get many people in there, right? And Tony will be talking about we were talking about legacy.
What I've just said of legacy planning and wealth preservation, but also quite happy if the audience require it to talk around specialist funding to leverage assets to grow portfolios and develop what they've got, or in terms of actually getting into the renovating, buying, selling, the homes under hammer thing. It can be, it can be done. It can be done.
Right. So, as I said, we have Antonio, who to me is one of the leading experts around the UK. The man is actually a diamond, and the man is giving some proper information, right? And the key is about information, because what you don't know, and it's a fact, we don't know. No, we kill you, we kill others as well, based on ignorance. That's why information is the key, and information is the way forward. And
more like what I'd add to that, brother Dougie, is information is important, but information is only any use to if you act on it.
If you act on it, you see what I'm saying?
You have to do something with it.
And the thing is that there are many people, who are very passionate in our community, very passionate, right? But this is my personal opinion. Don't necessarily have the tools to take it from to a certain level. But that's my personal opinion. They're very passionate, say this and say this and that, but when it comes to actually having the tools to move you to a certain point, not quite there yet. This has practical tools to share us to take us to a certain point. So it's very important to understand what's taking place here and come to the seminar. I'm just watching the clock, Antonio. Boy, you're deaf on a little talking thing. I'm
okay. I'm with you for a while.
I'm going to play a jingle of this event here.
Okay.
Right. So I want to make people know, sir. Okay then. I was trying to play the jingle earlier on, but I'm going to put in another CD play. But anyway, coming back to Sunday, the 31st of July, time 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Right, well, it's to 7:30, but we've got to be out by about 8. And in the main hall, we're talking about what is crowdfunding, and we have Brother Josie. We're talking about what is crowdfunding. So he began the history of crowdfunding and gives a background about crowdfunding. Your sister Juliet from the Working Action Group, we're talking about crowdfunding and other fundings to do the platforms on the crowdfunding. And she phoned in last week, and she was very successful because she raised something like £2,000. She had limited time to do it, and she done it. And so she be sharing a success story and encourage people to join the platform, the crowdfunding. And obviously Keith will be talking about how can one take advantage of crowdfunding, and particularly his particular crowdfunding organization he's encouraging people to be part of. So this is folks around crowdfunding, and it's £5 admission to come in. Now then, so the time is from 4 to 8. And for more information, please contact me, which is on, I'll give you both numbers. If you want stools as well, the tables are £15 each if you want a stool rather, stool space. There's still stools available, and the number to contact me is 07960 239 493. I repeat, 07960 239 493, or 0788 240 3871. I repeat, 0788 240 3871. So if you want more information, and there will be a workshop with Antonio and Brother Sean, and they'll be talking about finance, etc. And with that, it'll be a slightly smaller space, right? And there'll be a workshop in one of the classroom just beside where the theatre is. So this is something we'll be doing hopefully on a regular basis, but you still need to gel and get it gelling. But this time next year, we're gonna boss out in big time, you know. So we're still working on. We want our purpose is that we want to bring all the masterminds them to come together and talk about everything about finance, you know, property, finance, trust, will, you know, money. You know, we have money, and most of us have money in our pocket. You know, or some don't, some do, whatever it can be. But we don't know. We don't understand what money is, right? And here, what the brother said earlier on about his assets was most important. You know, because if you give people a bag of money, you know what I mean, within a few minutes they will spend it off. You know, in fact, you know, look at those who won the lottery. Right, this is a fact. They prove this time and time again. Right, those who won the lottery. Right, you know that those who won the lottery was won millions of pounds. Right, 5, 10, 15. Right, you know, even 5-7 years they become broke. Why is that? It's nothing to do with the money, it's the mindset. Because what is right in their mindset, they've got the money. In the mindset, they've got to spend the money. You know. So anyway, so that's taking place on the 31st, this Sunday coming, at the Parkview Academy, which is on West Kent Road, London, N15 3RB. So we've got 5 minutes. The time has gone so fast. I didn't even open the live link. I'm so engrossed into Antonio mesmerized me with some information. But we need this brother coming on a regular basis and talk about the whole thing about business. Yeah. And just break things down, right? Just break things down and just keep it simple and just break things down so we start to grasp certain things. So I'm going to he'll be coming down and we'll start bringing Sean. We can find time for him to come down and other individuals wanting to come down and talk about everything about business and finance and property, etc. Okay, Antonio, I just realized we only got a couple minutes left. So, Antonio, when you give out you got email address or details people can contact you with more information, or
happy to give office a number.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I can be reached on 0208 924 0207, and that's Monday through to Friday, and I'm usually available from 10 onwards.
Okay.
Usually till about 7. Yeah, so a relatively long day. But yeah, happy for anyone to call me on that number and contact me on that number. Any matters to do with what we've discussed today in relationship to buy-to-let mortgages, portfolio finance, bridging loans, which we didn't get to touch on, development funding, which we didn't get to deal with today. But today was kind of an overview and a chat. What we'll do, as you rightly say, in coming weeks, what I can do is spend an hour or two talking around each of those individual specialist areas, how they work, how people can use them to their benefit and advantage, how not to be afraid of them just because you've never heard of them, just because you can't see their name on the high street doesn't mean that they're dodgy, doesn't mean that they're still regulated, they're still answerable to regulators, etc. They still have to be licensed. So, but they're not on the high street because they're specialists, and only people who are doing certain things need their services. So I'm happy to be with you on Wednesdays, Dougie. We can expand this and we can talk around these things. We can also talk around, because a lot of the conversation is a bit towards those who have already got. What I'd like to do is actually spend a little bit of time also talking about how you can get started. So things such as the Help to Buy scheme, shared ownership, those sort of things. So those parents out there who are listening who are worried about their children, their youngsters, how they're going to get on the property ladder, how they're going to get started with, especially in London, with these big deposits that you need. There are various schemes out there that are government backed, etc., and we can spend a little time discussing and talking around those as well.
Definitely. Okay then, so we've got exactly about 3 minutes left, and we'll be joined by Rasta Pastor, who will be joining us very shortly, and as I said before, that all roads lead to the path of your coming this Sunday.
Yeah,
So
please come along and
out,
join us. Yeah,
right, come out. And if you haven't been to the Path of Your Academy, you need to come there because it's an amazing experience. You know, you see stools, you see there's so many things going on there, and the energy, the information, what you're getting,
the positiveness,
and the positive, yes,
the positive energy.
Positive energy.
Yeah.
You know, just come down and experience it.
Yeah. And it's a positive energy in what can we do, as opposed to why can't we?
What can't
and
we
I'm
do?
a can do person. I'm not a can't do person.
That's right. That's right.
And that's what I'm trying to do, is encourage everyone with a bit of knowledge that they can do. All you got to do is go and find out. Seek out people like me. Seek out people like Sean. Seek out gentlemen with crowdfunding.
Keith.
Yeah, we do exist. We are here. We have the knowledge. We have the expertise, and because of the decades that we've done what we do, or the specialist knowledge that we've got, because it's not all about age and depth of experience. Keith is crowdfunding in its present form is a relatively new place. It's only about 10 years old. But 10 years in industry in any area is an industry that's beginning to mature.
That's right.
You know, so come along, get informed.
And let me just write on the other thing about crowdfunding, that and this is what Keith was bringing to my attention, to our attention, right? That when Barack Obama started off his campaign for president, right, he used crowdfunding, right, and he raised $750 million.
Yeah. I think it was at $2 a piece. People were signing up at, I think if I remember rightly, it was about $2 a piece was the minimum, and that's he raised $750 million.
Yeah, you see, and the man wasn't even known. Just I do that thing, you know. But again, social media, because one thing he was saying that we can't be afraid of social media, you know. And, people like myself, you know, and all the heads know we kind of, you know, we can work our way around Facebook and the online and to a point, you know. But the young people, let them eat them thing up, you know what I mean. We can't be afraid of them, and that's where we're moving in today, you know what I mean, in that world. So I mean, you know, we can't be afraid, you know what I mean. Just spend some time out now and get familiar with social media. All of us, you know what I mean.
Fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear only exists in our heads. Fear is not tangible. Fear doesn't exist in the physical world. It only exists in our head, and that fear can be as big or as small as we choose to make it. It's all down to us. It's perception. It's how we perceive it.
It's perception. I like when he says that, you know, it's definitely our perception, you know. And in fact, if I had time, I would give you a story about in fact, I'll share the story very quickly, where this father had two sons, right? In fact, a year apart from each other. And you know what's interesting, Antonio, right? The father was very abusive, right? And it so happens that he was an alcoholic and all that stuff, you know, kind of messed up. Anyway, when he passed, right, one of the sons them become very successful, become a self-made millionaire. He had one find himself in a problem in prison and rehab and all kind of nonsense, right? And you know, son, when they interviewed the first son, and I asked him, so tell me, son, right, how come you become so successful? You know, he said, if you had a dad like mine, what would you do? And he asked the other one there, so tell me, son, why you become a failure, you've been in prison and blah blah blah. He said, if you had a dad like mine, what would you do? It's your perception. Every comes to how you perceive things, you know what I mean? You know? And it's quite interesting. A lot of the things we have is our mind. It's how we perceive things.
How we perceive it.
Yeah.
The world is as we see it.
Yeah.
You know, and you and I can look at the same thing and see two
different things. Yeah, definitely.
How we see it. So I'm very much Sorry. Yeah, it's very much how we see it.
How we see it.
And how our perception of the world. And I'm very much in terms of it's attempting to see things in an objective way, recognizing that we're conditioned by our life experiences, by our politics, by our religion, by our culture. So it's, can you attempt to see this thing separated from those things that will influence you in how you perceive it and make a decision?
Okay then. One minute, we'll put a pic, because Rastafari hasn't come in yet. So one minute, we'll play this jingle here.